All right, welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right in, because today we are unpacking what has to be one of the most darkly comedic, absolutely true stories of the Cold War. We're looking at Operation Acoustic Kitty, the CIA's bizarre attempt to turn a cat into a spy. I know, it literally sounds like a joke, right? Or some bad spy movie parody. But as we'll see, the US government took this incredibly seriously. They poured years of research and millions of dollars into a project that just perfectly encapsulates the absolute paranoia of the 1960s.
So, to understand how on earth we get to a cybernetic spy cat, we really have to put ourselves in the mindset of the era and ask, how do you eavesdrop on a Soviet target in plain sight without raising any suspicion whatsoever? Look, in the 1960s, the US and the Soviets were locked in this desperate, high-stakes race for intelligence. The problem was, traditional mechanical bugs were failing. They were either getting swept up by security, like that brilliant Soviet Great Seal bug that didn't even use batteries, or they were just picking up way too much background noise. You'd get the squeaking of shoes or a passing car, and it would completely drown out the human voices. The CIA desperately needed a bug that could filter out the noise and literally walk right past armed guards.
Enter the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, who proposed a totally audacious solution, a common street cat. And okay, as totally absurd as it sounds to us now, their logic kind of makes sense when you really think about it. An animal can freely bypass security sweeps. Think about it. Nobody pats down a stray cat in a park or an embassy courtyard, right? They figured if they could pull this off, a cat would be the ultimate cover. It's an unalerting, perfectly disguised mobile listening post.
So where did this wild idea actually come from? Well, the inspiration sparked after CIA operatives noticed feral cats just wandering completely unimpeded through an Asian head of state's highly sensitive strategy sessions. The operatives realized that during these super high-stakes diplomatic meetings, people just treat a cat as part of the background environment. They literally ignore it. The light bulb moment was, if we can bug the cat, we can bug the room, and absolutely nobody would bat an eye.
But here's the catch. Turning a living creature into a cyborg is no small feat. Actually, it's a massive medical undertaking. We have to remember, this is the 1960s. This is the era of room-sized computers, long before tiny microchips were a thing. To pull this off, veterinary surgeons performed a really invasive hour-long operation. They implanted a tiny microphone directly into the cat's ear canal to use the ear's natural cochlea as a way to filter out ambient noise. Then, they embedded a 3/4-inch radio transmitter right at the base of the skull, and, get this, they literally wove a fine wire antenna all the way down, beneath the fur, into the cat's tail.
It was a monumental technical challenge, and honestly, a pretty grotesque one. Former CIA officer Victor Marchetti later recounted the procedure, and his quote is just stark. He said, "They slit the cat open, put batteries in him, wired him up. They made a monstrosity. They were trying to pack analog electronics into a small, living, breathing animal. They had to deal with internal body heat, biology, and do the whole shebang without anyone noticing any scars or wires from the outside."
And the sheer financial absurdity of this whole endeavor is just staggering. Over roughly 5 years of intense research, surgical modifications, and behavioral training, the CIA sank an estimated $15 to $20 million into this project. Think about that for a second. Let that sink in. That is a massive, massive investment of taxpayer money and top-tier scientific brainpower, all poured into a single, furry, feline field agent.
Okay, but getting the tech inside the cat was really only half the battle. Now they actually had to figure out how to steer their $20 million asset. So the agency brought in animal behavior experts like Bob Bailey to train the cat using operant conditioning. That's basically a learning process where behavior is controlled by consequences. They used ultrasonic sounds, totally inaudible to human ears, to try and direct the cat left, right, or straight ahead toward a target. But they very quickly hit a giant, inherently comedic roadblock that no amount of Cold War funding could possibly fix. And that roadblock was feline biology. Because, unlike highly trainable dogs, cats just do not care about national security. The handlers faced massive issues, both in the lab and in the field. The cat would wander off when it got bored, it got constantly distracted by its environment, and most problematically of all, it simply walked off the job the second it got hungry. I mean, you can have a $20 million state-of-the-art radio transmitter, but if your spy decides it wants a snack, the espionage mission is officially over.
So what did they do? In a totally desperate attempt to salvage their multi-million-dollar investment, technicians reportedly went back in for a second surgery.
This one was specifically designed to essentially override the cat's natural biological instincts. They tried to artificially dampen its sense of hunger and sexual arousal. Think about the hubris here. They were literally trying to hardwire obedience into an animal that has spent thousands of years domesticating us, trying to force a biological creature to act with the sheer predictability of a synthetic machine.
Well, eventually, by 1967, the heavily modified Acoustic Kitty was finally deemed ready. It was time for a high-stakes, real-world field test. The mission? Eavesdrop on two men sitting on a park bench on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C., right outside a Soviet compound. So the handlers park an unmarked surveillance van across the street, they dial in their radio frequencies, they crack open the van door, and they release their cyborg spy into the wild.
Now, here's where the history gets really murky, and it's actually highly debated among historians. One widely reported account, this one comes from Victor Marchetti, claims the cat walked about 10 feet and was immediately run over by a passing taxi upon release, instantly destroying the asset. Boom, over. But former Office of Technical Service Director Robert Wallace insists that whole taxi story is an exaggerated urban legend. Wallace claims the cat was simply disobedient. It just wouldn't go to the bench, and the project was gracefully abandoned. In his version, the hardware was humanely removed, and the cat lived out a happy, peaceful retirement. Regardless of whether the cat got hit by a cab or just decided to take a nap on the sidewalk, the final result was exactly the same. A dry, heavily redacted 1967 CIA memo officially canceled the project. The memo stated that the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation force us to conclude that it would not be practical. I mean, wow, letting that massive bureaucratic understatement speak for itself is just incredible. Not practical is certainly one way to describe a $20 million cat that flat out refuses to listen to you.
Hilariously, though, that exact same closing memorandum attempted to save a little face on this monumental failure. It actually praised the team's energy and imagination, officially calling the whole endeavor a remarkable scientific achievement. And, okay, to be fair to the engineers, getting analog electronics to function inside a living animal without killing it was a massive technical leap for the 1960s. The technology itself actually worked perfectly. It was literally just the cat that refused to cooperate with the CIA.
Ultimately, Operation Acoustic Kitty leaves us to reflect on this big, final question. What does a $20 million cyborg cat reveal about the limits of human hubris and Cold War paranoia? It shows us the absurd, darkly comedic length that governments will go to just to outsmart one another. And it serves as a pretty humbling reminder that all the money, science, and technology in the world still cannot force a cat to follow orders. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep your curiosity sharp and always keep questioning the history you think you know.